What will the next 10 years of the Pokemon franchise look like? What's up everyone, it's Dusty Gogoat. Welcome back to my headcanon. We're going to be talking about the future of Pokemon and what the next 10 years could look like, what games we're going to see, what remakes we're going to see. Right now when I'm recording this video, this is what I think the timeline's going to be. First up, we've got Scarlet and Violet, and I'm having a lot of fun with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but I'd be lying if I didn't say these weren't the games that I've anticipated all year long. On the flip side, we do have confirmation by highly credible leakers that DLC will be arriving for Scarlet and Violet later next year. I think this is going to include 1 to 4 new maps or areas that we can explore. I also don't think we're done with Area 0. That story's not over yet. That time machine will activate once more, and players will be able to travel further into the past or future depending on their version. In both scenarios, players will be able to discover additional Paradox Pokemon, the suspiciously missing 3rd legendary, and maybe even get an explanation for their existence. Come to think of it, I would love to know more about the Ruinous Quartet as well. The Sword and Shield DLC performed so well, so I really think DLC is going to be part of the plan moving forward. I also really think what they're going to want to do is prolong Gen 9 out until pretty much 2026, which is the 30th anniversary of Pokemon. So DLC is really going to help prolong this period of time that we have with the games. Scarlet and Violet are the first open world Pokemon games. I think they're really going to want to lean into that and make it feel almost like an MMO where it's this like living, breathing thing. I think the Scarlet and Violet DLC is really going to be a home run. So far, Generation 9's off to a pretty rough start, and recently I've been daydreaming about my ideal Pokemon game. And I know there are a lot of playable fan games. There have been countless times where I've thought, maybe that's something I want to do. Maybe I want to build a video game. If you had the same knowledge and experience, would you want to build a Pokemon game? Now, can you imagine turning this into an actual career with opportunities for growth? Southern New Hampshire University is sponsoring this video. SNU has one of the largest accredited non-profit online degree offerings in the country. I know this because I grew up in New Hampshire right next to this college. In Southern New Hampshire University's game development program, you'll learn how to create realistic, dynamic gameplay experiences with game AI, game physics, 2D and 3D graphics, and interface design. You'll also learn computer programming languages like C++, C#, and Java. And you can learn 3D modeling, texturing with game art software. Courses are taught by industry experts who will teach you how to research, develop, and contribute to advances and trends within the field of game programming. SNU is radically affordable. Their tuition rates are some of the lowest in the nation. You can go to snhu.edu/gogoat, also linked in the description, to see what the current average annual salary for a programmer is and request free information about the program. Once you request information, a real person will hop on the call and discuss how the program can help you personally. It only takes 1 click to find your calling. Moving on to 2024, this is going to be a big year for Pokemon, I think. 2024 is going to include a Generation 3 port to the Nintendo Switch. We saw a similar thing happen with Generation 1 and 2 on the 3DS. That brought those games into Generation 7. They were also made compatible with Pokemon Bank. I think the Switch would absolutely benefit for having the Hoenn region, right? All 3 of those Hoenn games, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, as well as the Kanto games, right? We can't go more than 5 years without a reissue of a Kanto game. So Generation 3 includes Fire Red and Leaf Green. Having all 5 of these games on the Nintendo Switch is going to be super fun. And then of course these games would be compatible with Pokemon Home. If they wanted to be really good, I mean, like they could just make some of these available for free, but that's not going to happen. These are going to be like $10 purchases probably each. On my list, I really only think those 5 games are going to be added, but who knows? They could add. I'm tempted to be like Coliseum and XD Gale of Darkness. You know, those came out in Gen 3. So I'm not holding my breath for that. It's not on my list. Specifically because of that. So now you might be thinking, that's great, we have Kanto and we have Hoenn on the Nintendo Switch, that's great, but what about Johto? I think they're purposefully gonna exclude Johto from the 2024 reissue, because later that year we're gonna see a faithful remake of Heart Gold, Soul Silver, probably made by Ilka, right? Pokemon Home still exists, and BDSP is the best-selling remake of all time, which is it's so stupid. It's so stupid, but those are the facts, right? Those are the facts. That is the timeline that we are in, so this is probably the timeline that we're going to end up with. The main problem with BDSP, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, was that it was a remake of Diamond and Pearl and not Platinum. I would argue that it's kind of hard to mess up Heart Gold, Soul Silver. Those are already remakes of Gold and Silver, and they have so many additional features, and everything about them is like just built into the game. And then ILCA has a couple extra years to really pick up the slack and fix all the bugs and all the problems of those games. I think the reason why Pokemon wants to push these faithful remakes, I think it's easy to port Game Boy games, but DS games are a whole nother beast. They're built with 2 screens. They're built with touch compatibility. These remakes are glorified ports, right? It's way easier to make these chibi style games than to reprogram DS games. And I think this game could be very good. Everyone says they don't want it, but like I think these could actually be just sleeper hits. I think they could be so good. And if ILCA is given another shot and they're able to perfect this, fans like it, you know, and it sells super well, then this could create a whole nother third pillar for Pokemon games going forward. Like, and they'd be actually fun. They'd be great. They could port all of the original Pokemon games, yeah, sure. But they could also give us these new revamped versions in 3D. Up next in 2025, this is really where like the timeline could split into 3 or 4 different directions. I'm gonna stick to the script and tell you, but I really think we're gonna get a Pokemon Legends Johto game. I've been talking about you know, a Johto remake for 2 years. This has to happen. Johto is the earliest game that has not been remade or revisited in some way. A lot of people think it's definitely going to be Unova. I think we will get a Unova remake eventually, but that's not happening in 2 years. That's happening earliest 5 years from now. And just like we got the second remake of Kanto before a Gen 4 remake, I think we're going to get a second remake of Johto before the Unova remake. But this game is going to be great because they have an opportunity to make this Johto game in the Legends style. They already have an engine. This seems to be the theme. Like a faithful remake of Heart Gold, Soul Silver would be so great because they already have an engine to work off of. And they also already have a Legends engine to work off of. So what they could do is use all those assets and make a Johto game. And the beauty of this is that Johto is directly combined with Kanto. And if this game takes place in the past or in another dimension, the protagonist of this game could explore this long ago region where Johto and Kanto were really the same region. To actually see Johto in an open world game would be absolutely incredible. Johto and Kanto, while they are combined, they are divided by a mountain range. I could totally see there being like a political through line through all of the characters throughout the region. The Kanto side is really pushing for technology and for the progression of civilization, while the Johto side is always advocating for tradition in the past, for things to be how they used to be. You know, you could say this is kind of in line with what we see in Generation 5, but I also think this past versus future is definitely a theme that we see in Scarlet and Violet. And again, just to see this legacy region, Johto, in full 3D is a dream come true. And to further connect Johto to Scarlet and Violet, legend says that Ho-Oh revived the mysterious Pokemon, and the 3 Pokemon became Suicune, Raikou, and Entei. In the text of the Scarlet book, there is an image of what looks to be a Paradox Suicune. Come on guys, you do the math. Truly, there is a lot of awesome possibilities. Now I think later in 2025, we could see some small DLCs for Pokemon Legends Johto, but I think we could also see Gens 1 and 2 ported. That way we have all Pokemon Game Boy games on the Nintendo Switch. I think what made the 3DS so amazing for me was that it was a total Pokemon system. You could play every single mainline Pokemon game, period. I think that's so powerful, and I think the Switch is not even that far off. All it would be missing would be a couple of DS and 3DS games, but I think some of those DS games are going to be ported or remade within this decade. So in 2026, this will be the 30th anniversary of the Pokemon franchise. 25 was great. I think 30 is going to be even better. I think there's no better way to celebrate 30 years of a franchise without a brand new game. And this is going to be Generation 10. It's going to be revolutionary. I think Gen 9 in a lot of ways is perfecting the 3D Pokemon formula, and I think Gen 10's either going to be a continuation or a maximum version of that. Gen 10 could be an MMO. I've heard people say like Gen 10 is gonna last 5 years. I think it'd be interesting to go back to like Japan, but it's been over 10 years since a Pokemon game was based in Japan. I think this is a great opportunity for that. And with the new generation, we get a new batch of starters, the new possibility of a new evolution, new fossils, new gimmicks, right? Like what is Gen 10 gimmick gonna be? I honestly think at some point we should be getting fusion Pokemon. We see those with legendaries already. Or maybe they just go back to their roots and there is no gimmick and it's just like a great game. And then I think they're really gonna wanna like switch it up. So like in 2027, many Pokemon directors have always said they love to confuse or surprise fans. When we expect something, they do the opposite. They pivot, they do the opposite. I think DLC makes sense for Gen 10, but what if they did something crazy and they gave us a sequel? What if in 2027 they gave us a sequel to Gen 10? And I think this would very nicely line up with what we could be seeing later in that generation with the Gen 5 remakes. Again, this is another point where I think the timeline deviates. There's multiple versions of the timeline. Generation 5, it was the first revamp of the series. So we've got the debut Black and White, and then we've got the sequel to Black and White, Black 2 and White 2. It's tough for me to determine which game would be remade. I mean, I think the track record shows that they would remake Black and White and exclude Black 2, White 2. They could do a thing where, you know, they remake Black and White, but they include all of the all the extras and the add-ons from Black 2 and White 2. And I would only say that because Black 2, White 2 are completely different games, right? I feel like Platinum, Emerald, Crystal version, they have elements that are new, but they really are the same exact game. And I feel like Black 2, White 2 is the only third version sequel that is really a brand new game. Option 1 for the Black and White remake is that they literally remake Black and White and Black 2, White 2 with a faithful remake style. Option 2 is they remake the original Generation 5 game, Black and White, but they inject all of the additions that were added to Black 2 and White 2. Option 3 is starting to sound like the most plausible solution, and that is a reboot of the Generation 5 game. So this isn't a remake per se. This type of game would be akin to Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. The story setting is the same as Black and White in Unova, but the plot takes place from a new perspective for whatever this new protagonist is. This game would expand the Unova map to include all of the areas that are available in Black 2, White 2. This game could further establish itself as the spiritual Black 3, White 3 if it can successfully touch on and expand on the following topics. I think if this game is set 10 years after the events of Black 2 and White 2, we can see all the characters expanded upon new locations, the aftermath of Team Plasma. I want to see what happened to N. What are my rivals doing now? We need a really good shuffle of the gym leaders of the Elite Four. One of the biggest things that needs to be solved is really about the original dragon. Gen 5 set up so much lore around the original dragon, the dragon that was split into 3 parts we know as Kyurem, Reshiram, and Zekrom, but that lore needs an explanation. What does the final dragon actually look like? If I had to speculate, I could see this being dragon normal type, maybe just a pure dragon type as well. The features that a Gen 5 remake could touch on include an expansion of the seasons mechanic. Also, they should introduce brand new locations that have never existed before in the Unova region. I think that'd be really cool. Generation 5 introduced triple and rotation battles. It introduced the Dream World with Dream, or with hidden abilities rather. Maybe this game can unlock a 4th potential hidden ability for a lot of Pokemon. That would forever change the competitive landscape. Whatever we end up with, as long as it's a thoughtful project by Game Freak, I'm gonna be happy. If this game ends up being a cheaply made faithful remake like BDSP, a lot of people will not forgive Game Freak. And of course, the question everyone is asking, will the Gen 5 remakes be 2D, chibi, or fully open world 3D? I think it's too early to make a fair prediction, but I really think if they're gonna make another 2D game, something like Octopath Traveler, and Game Freak can finally return to its roots in game development. Now that it's been a decade of 3D Pokemon, I feel like people are hungering for a return, a throwback to pixel art Pokemon. I mean, that was the foundation of the franchise for 15 years. We don't have that any longer, but I would love it. Any sort of remake or port or just I want Game Freak to embrace pixel art once more, because you can really only go so far with a 3D Pokemon game before you enter that uncanny valley of like trying to be realistic. I think Gen 10 is a great opportunity to introduce all these new styles of Pokemon games similar to The Legend of Zelda and the Mario franchise. Both of these titles have multiple different iterations of their IP. I think Pokemon has been kind of tiptoeing trying to do this with Let's Go, Legends, and the Faithful remakes, but I think at some point, regardless of sales numbers, they need to put their foot down and actually just commit to giving us a series of these different types of games. Because now I'm thinking after like 2030, right? These numbers are getting ridiculous. But like, what if that far into the future, we're getting pixel art versions of the 3D titles? All right, let's get into some honorable mentions. These are just some wild predictions. So we're all playing Generation 9 right now, and everyone's predicting in 2 years, we're either gonna get a Generation 5 or a Generation 2 remake. Well, what if the remake, right? Because what if the remake is Kalos? Game Freak loves to break our expectations, and nothing would be more wild than a Kalos remake. By the time we're even ready for another remake, Pokemon X and Y will be celebrating their 10-year anniversary. I even said in this video that Generation 2 in Johto makes the most sense. But if you think about it, Kalos is right there. It's so close. Kalos is so close in geographic proximity to Paldea. Everything about the crystallized ultimate weapon, Terra Stellization, Area Zero, AZ's Floette looking like a Paradox Pokemon. There's a lot of weird connections here. This is surely a crazy idea, but I don't think it's impossible. We'll have to wait and see. And then if we jump to Generation 10, I think it'd be fun if like we saw Generation 10 and then we saw DLC for Generation 10, and then what would fall into that remake slot, like the next game, would actually be a HD 2D version of the Generation 10 game that we just played. And what that would do, right, in the 10th generation, it would retroactively put all of the Pokemon that we know about from Generation 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 would all now be available with 2D sprite work. Something else to keep in mind is that the trustworthy leakers who revealed everything about Pokemon Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet have actually discussed development for Generation 10 and Generation 11. Kind of wild to think about. I definitely think it's too far away to speculate. The number one thing that I hope for the future of Pokemon is that Pokemon stops rushing their games. And part of me knows the machine will never stop, but I really hope they devise a workflow that allows every single new Pokemon game to be fun and complete. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet really are a ton of fun, but it's hard to be proud of this franchise when the performance of these games are so obviously unfinished. If you guys like this style of video, hit the bell so you don't miss the next upload. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching, and good luck hunting.